following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives. My name is David Schoneman. I'm your host on this program. On Perspectives, we look at a variety of issues that concern us here in Nashua that are really happening on state, local, or national levels. There's a lot going on in the world today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about politics. And anytime we hear the word politics, we start to think about the disastrous behaviors that we're observing down in Washington, where we see that there are accusations of witch hunts and political campaigns that seem to be based more on emotional drivers than on common sense and logic. We're abandoning truth in favor of emotion, it seems. And lest we think that this happens only down in D.C., we need to look maybe here in Nashua too and see that the example that's set in Washington really unfortunately extends down into the state and even here into Nashua. Today we're going to take a look at some issues that are being driven by emotions, not logic, right here in the city of Nashua, and they concern the school board. With me in the studio today to talk about something that's happening currently is Doris Hohensee. Doris has been on the school board for nearly 4 years, and she is under some really attack if we take a look at what you've seen in the paper, both in the Telegraph and Union Leader and elsewhere on social media these days, that is based on emotion, not on fact. Doris, welcome. Thank you for coming in the studio.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You are a lightning rod these days.
I guess I am.
It seems for some very, very vicious attacks. In fact, the nexus of what you're facing these days comes from a quote that you posted on social media just a few weeks ago that identified that the political environment today, socialism in particular, which seems to be a hot topic, is driven more by emotional appeal than biological appeal. Right. Tell us what happened. What did you do? What happened?
I posted a quote from a Harvard professor in 1922. I got the quote from a friend. I hadn't read about the author before. I just read the quote and I'm like, wow. It attacked socialism, and it showed how they put emotion over reason and logic. And it was a couple of sentences long, and it said it's a civilization destroyer. You have to, so what's happened to me is exactly what's in that quote. So it turns out they got all offended because this person had a radical background. So instead of looking at the quote, not one person has looked at the quote. They talk about the author. The author was radical, so therefore I'm radical. Guilt by association.
So you read this quote, someone sent it to you, and it seemed to paint the picture, really to identify in clear English what's going on in the world today.
Right.
Maybe not just here in Nashua with the school board, but with broader things in Nashua or with state or certainly with national politics these days. This drive for emotional appeal rather than a logical appeal. So you saw that and you thought, this is what's happening. And so you posted this quote.
It tied all the pieces together.
This explains what we're facing today. Emotional appeal, not logical appeal.
But we have it in our curriculum. We have Common Core that encourages student activism. Well, that's fine, but they encourage student activism on an emotional level.
So you posted the quote, and then they're essentially proving that the quote is true because they come after you with not a logical attack, but with an emotional attack based on your identification with the problem being, an emotional problem.
Right. And I'm saying this is what's going on in our curriculum. We've had Common Core for 10 years. We're doing a new program called Social Emotional Learning. And it's really behavior modification because they're going to act your values, your attitudes, your beliefs, and they're going to assess the student for these and help modify them. This isn't academics, and there's going to be data tracking on it. It's kind of an invasive thing you wouldn't want to begin with. But again, they're telling you that emotion is paramount, not logic or reason. You built your civilization on this. It's going to collapse.
It is going to collapse. I think that's what's happening.
That was my problem.
That's what we see happening in D.C. and
Yeah.
elsewhere. It's just everything seems to be spinning out of control because it's this hate and envy drivers that are just forcing people to be blind to the truth, and it's causing just mayhem.
Well, they
on all
wanted me to
levels.
apologize. The opposition wanted me to apologize. A friend pointed out, she did some research. She said, you know, this gentleman was also paired up with Margaret Sanger and was on the board for Planned Parenthood. So he was an eugenicist. But Planned Parenthood, which was designed, according to Margaret Sanger, to limit the number of blacks that are born, she was racist. But the organization is fine. There's no smearing over there. But me quoting this other thing, which had no racial connotations at all. It was just socialism, logic, reason, and motion. And now I'm tied up with all this bad stuff, and I should resign.
So you didn't write the quote. I mean, it isn't your quote. You just saw it and posted it. It'd be like posting something from George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or something like that.
And they both have slaves. So if I quoted them, would I be pushing? That I would. That's how stupid it is, because they're attacking the man instead of the argument that the man's talking about.
Right.
That's not a debate.
Right.
That's emotional.
So based on your publishing or just reprinting or just sharing a quote on social media, right? They're asking you to resign. Now,
well, that and another thing, but they called me a white supremacist now. They love their terms. And then there was an issue of the marksmanship
so
program.
there's no basis for that accusation.
No.
In truth,
No.
You're not a white supremacist.
It's hard to well, you want proof that I'm not? The superintendent, I flipped 2 votes plus my vote to get him elected. He's our first superintendent of color. That same year, later that year, I helped a woman of color whose daughter is now on our school board as a representative, but I got 50 petitions for her to be on the school board. Why would I get the 50 petitions for a woman of color
if that was your position?
If I was a white supremacist? It doesn't make any sense. But we won't talk about that because that undermines their narrative that I'm bad.
Right. So that's the issue, really. They have a narrative, and it's in a narrative that they want to force on people based on their emotional reaction to you being on the board.
Right.
And what you tend to stand for on the board is an application of law.
I try to uphold the rule. I took that oath, and I keep reminding them that it's an individual oath, not a collective oath. You can't just vote away a law.
Right.
Like I got in trouble in January. There was I posted. I asked for the written procedures for the student elections. By law, they're supposed to have them. And there were some irregularities. It affects all the students that ran, not the winners and the losers, all of them. So the superintendent said I was weaponizing the right to know law. No, you just satisfied my right to know law. It's a law. Let's follow it.
Right.
So,
they don't want to follow that law. They don't want to provide what...
So they were smearing me then. And then a constituent wrote me a letter, which I have in my bag of evidence here. It went to the superintendent reported me to the police because this constituent thought he was acting rather dictatorially.
The superintendent tends to
law.
Overreact anyway. We've had police issues with him before.
He calls
an out-of-court settlement with a former school board member that was just his emotional reaction against really just a member of the public. So he has another bad reaction here.
So then
files a police report.
Yeah. So I get my first police report, and this one it says, no crime involved. Free speech. It's alive and well, except in our district.
Yes.
So that was the first.
So it sounds like the superintendent was alleging some kind of a crime.
He thought it would escalate. More parents and constituents would write letters attacking his misbehavior. That would be a good thing. I mean, let's get him to behave.
Let's get him to behave. So he responds, not in what I would call an adult manner.
No, and there were no rules for that election, so he was violating the law.
I see.
But
so he files a police report against you for
to distract and intimidate. Now we have this marksmanship program that passed 5-3, and it took 2 months to do it. And then a student in the school was very upset. I mean, she has a right to be upset.
Sure.
But she put something on Facebook, and it was shared 126 times. I found one of those satellite postings, and I shared it with a group because people were interested in the topic. And
you just shared someone else's post.
Something in the public domain.
That was posted by this particular
Right,
student,
right.
a girl,
And then she
18-year-old
goes to
girl.
the Mosley, talks to the principal, encourages the parents to file a police report. This is police report number 2. No crime involved.
So you just all you did was repost on
Shared
social
information.
media something that the student had posted herself. She posted it herself,
Mm-hmm.
and so you reposted it. You said this is what's
And then some parent said, "Oh, this is terrible. This should be a heavy backlash." I'm not against the student doing this. This is the
Sure.
district's fault. They're encouraging activism on an emotional level. So I I redirected her conversation to social emotional learning. It's right in there in my quote. So they're saying that I took people and told them to go to their website and attack her. What I said is, you want to see the pros and cons argument, go to the place I found it, or the original post on the student website, because there were a lot of conversation there. They were actually for and against debate.
Great.
So apparently she got some negative feedback. And it's all my fault, because somebody said there should be a heavy backlash. I said there should be a heavy backlash, not heavy. I said there should be a backlash by rational people against social emotional learning and these curriculum. It's
Right.
not the students' fault. They're just pawns in this game.
Yeah, they are. Well, it is a game, and it's politics. I was involved in politics here. You're still involved. Politics is about money, and it's about influence and power and control. And what they're driving here, what they're using these students. People are using these students for power and control, you're really using them as pawns. So,
but this student went to the union leader, had an article in the paper on the morning of the day that she went to talk to the police. It's got her name in it. She's screaming for publicity, and
Right.
I violated her privacy. She's 18 years old. I didn't know her age at the time, but I didn't say anything rude.
Yeah.
I was just sharing information and redirecting conversation so people could have a rational approach to something that was getting hysterical.
Again, there was then a second police report, and it says right here on the cover, no crime committed.
But that wasn't put in our board packet. They
Yeah.
took 3 pages below that, but they didn't put that there was no.
So based on your publishing a quote regarding socialism,
It was against socialism.
against socialism, and really defining socialism's appeal as an emotional appeal.
Right.
You got an emotional reaction out of the board,
Which
really
proves-
directed at you for even daring to say some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So politically, right here in Nashua, in our own school board, it looks like it's spinning out of control.
Yeah.
What is going on over there?
Well, they want my resignation. So then they had an illegal meeting. The board president met with 6 members, few at a time. It's called a daisy chain meeting, asking for my resignation, putting it up on the website like as if it was an official document or an official verdict of the board with a noticed public meeting and a public
Which
vote.
did not occur.
Never happened.
Okay.
So our attorney said if they're going to do that, they ought to clarify, take the header off it. Shouldn't be district, or board letterhead, put the names of the people involved and allow me to have a rebuttal. Board president refuses because I'm not allowed to peddle falsehoods and
But they are.
conspiracy. Well, I got emails from her on May 10th. I spoke with the majority, they individually came to me. 3 days later, she wrote, I didn't have a quorum. That means she didn't have a majority.
Right.
So you can look at her emails and she's lying
Yeah.
one way or the other. I don't know which it is. Doesn't really matter. It wasn't a public meeting. There is no official position of the board. They're asking for my resignation.
Are you going to resign?
No,
Good. Are you going to apologize?
I didn't. When I do something wrong, I did do something wrong. I sealed minutes from that non-public session we had before they voted to suspend the marksmanship program. I should never have done that. I voted against going into non-public. I was suspicious, but coming out, I made a mistake. And I found out later with a right to know request that another person did and brought it to me. The information they talked about in the non-public session was in the public domain. She had it in her right to know request. So why would they bring us so they didn't have to talk in public about something that was that's wrong. 3 times I objected in non-public because they were discussing the motion that they were going to use when they came out of non-public. I said that violates the right to know law 3 times. So there is a new state law, thank goodness, that says that you have to note that in the public meeting. My objection and they didn't update I need to correct the minutes.
Does the school board attorney attend the meetings?
No,
You know,
we have
for
no
the Board of Aldermen,
parliamentarian
the city
either.
attorney
Yes.
does attend the meetings, and he's frequently called on, particularly in non-public session, for some expertise on, what do we do here? And I think it's good. I think that he's doing a good job, and he keeps the board doing things that are legal, on at least the Board of Aldermen. When I was there, I don't know about now. But it looks like clearly you're being railroaded.
Because I'm very, they don't want me on the board. I point out when they break the law. I took this oath. I would have done it anyway without the oath.
The oath is very, very important. Politics, the offices that we hold are not about us.
No.
They're about law. And rule of law is very, very important. I've said this before. The day is going to come when there's a different president or a different governor or a different mayor or a different school board or a different board of aldermen. And the public, business investors, people considering moving into Nashua, or someone sending their kids to our schools, whatever. The public needs to know that even though there's turnover in these offices, which there should be, we're just volunteers. Even though there's turnover in his offices, there will be consistency in approach, because we are based on rule of law, not rule of individual. We are based on logic, not on emotions, which are fleeting and changing all the time. But now we seem to live in a world, not just in DC, but right here at home, where the driver seems to be emotion, not logic, not rule of law. You're pointing out law, and they're upset with your pointing out law. They don't want to know about law.
They want it hidden.
They want it hidden. They want to do what they want to do no matter what.
I don't know how many times they've broken the law. And one time in particular, I asked them to follow this and at least apologize for what they did. And I was told by a board member that my expectation that the rule of law would be upheld is a sign of my privilege.
What?
They all took an oath. But they're saying, me, I have this crazy sense of privilege. Is that white privilege? I don't know what kind of privilege they mean.
That rule of law will be upheld?
Yeah, that's.
Well, rule of law is the basis for everything, and we do take an oath.
They shut down the meeting, and they didn't correct their breaking of the law. That's the board majority. I have trouble functioning on that board.
What is happening in this city?
Might makes right. They think they've got the votes, and that's it, and I should just be quiet and sit in the back of the bus.
Right. Ends justify the means.
Yep.
This is what's going on in the city of Nashua. I went to
It's horrible.
It is horrible. It is horrible. And I hope that voters watching the show at home today, or whenever they have a chance to view it, will understand that local elections matter a lot.
They do.
Turnout tends to be low, but local elections matter a lot, because what happens in a school board, these are elected officials. The conduct should match what the law says. What happens in a board of aldermen, these are two elected officials. It doesn't look like a very mature, wise group these days.
No, they're name calling.
Yeah.
It's a schoolyard. They're giving me names. White supremacists, whatever they want.
Speaking of schools, when I was on the board of aldermen, I often pointed out that our school ranking is actually pretty low, especially for the amount of money that we spend.
We're not focusing on academics.
We're not focusing on academics. We're focusing on all these power games, really.
Well, now it's behavior.
But behavior that they're focusing on, it's about their power game to change.
Values, attitudes, and beliefs. We had this presentation I asked for a year. We finally got a presentation. I thought it'd be during a board meeting so we could ask questions and the board could be involved. No, we had somebody outside the district come, and we were...
A presentation on what?
Social emotional learning. And we sat in the audience. And this woman, very nice woman, came and presented. And one of the things that stuck with me, she said, we're hunter-gatherers. So, that's a survival trait. So we surveil our perimeter almost constantly. And 70-80% of our thoughts, this is her words, are negative, because we're always, looking for danger. And we've got to change that. We need happy thoughts. We need positive thoughts from our kids. So they're going to help switch the thoughts to positive thoughts of our little kids. If you can't honestly say what you think or how you feel, if you get this pressure from your little community, your school, on what's acceptable behavior and what's unacceptable, you've got to lock down. You're so isolated you can't even talk about how you feel.
We have a 2.5-year-old at home, and he's still a couple years away from going to school. But when I hear these stories, and when I see what's in the paper, when I observe from the inside as a member of the Board of Aldermen what really goes on. There's no way I want to send our son to the Nashua public school system.
Well, I think
It's a mess.
their nominal reason is good. They say we want to, make sure there's no mental health problems. We don't want kids to get so upset that they end up shooting their fellow students.
Right.
Okay. That might be the purpose. But what they're trying to do, but what they're doing won't accomplish that. Because if you're telling everybody to repress how they feel about things
Right.
and
To not face the
bottling all
truth.
that up, they're
Right.
going to explode even bigger.
Yeah, we have to, we
You
don't
can't-
need to be afraid of truth individually
Yeah.
or collectively. We do not need to be afraid of truth.
Yeah.
Truth is always going to win out in the end anyway.
It
So
will.
we should be willing to not decide on truth, but to discover what really is true,
Mhm.
whether it's collusion in Washington or whether it's, following the law and the genesis for the quote that you published.
Yeah.
We should be willing to look at the truth, and students should be encouraged that way too. It sounds like everything's being twisted around. Rule of law is not honored.
Right.
Emotions are manipulated and suppressed in some cases.
Well, the marksmanship program is a perfect example. Now, I understand they're afraid and they don't want guns normalized in their schools, but these are air rifles. The sound they make is like opening a bottle of pop, of soda.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's lead pellets. They might break paper at 300 feet. I mean, they
And this is being done by the ROTC program.
We're asking for it to be done. It was approved and now it's been suspended. So they don't feel comfortable. Maybe we should have safety classes. Anybody that hasn't touched or seen a gun. So they are, and these are not really firearms because
No,
there's
they're
no
not firearms.
propellant. This is just air pushing them.
Right.
So they would feel more comfortable. But they came and they told everybody how they feel because all on an emotional level. The cadets, the JROTC cadets sat there. They were told not to speak. Their leader spoke, one of them. There's like 36 of them. They didn't speak. But you have to.
They're also students.
They're also students. But how devastated must they feel? Here they are, their peers, and they're shunning them. They're telling them they need to move off campus. There's facilities on campus, but we don't want you around. You have a career that you want to protect and defend us,
Right.
but we don't want you anywhere around.
Hmm.
That I've heard from parents, they want to pull their kid from the program
Well, I think there's
because it's not.
sadly there's way too many reasons for pulling their kids out of programs and out of these schools.
They absolutely love the program, love the teachers. But this is what the community tells them, the message that you're unwanted. I mean, they could be a police officer, an SRO.
Sure.
There could be all kinds, but you need somebody that'll protect
Now,
and
where
defend.
does leadership, where does City Hall stand on trying to lead through some of the mess that exists? Is there any leadership coming out of City Hall?
No, we're separate.
I understand you're separate, but still there are examples. I mean,
We have aldermen that came. We have Alderman Schmidt. I think she's still an alderman, Jan Schmidt.
yes.
She was there. There's a former state
Were
rep.
they speaking on behalf of truth and the need to focus
They
on
were-
logic, or were they?
Some of them were organizing the
emphasizing-
students in opposition.
So they're emphasizing the emotional.
Yeah.
They're not doing anything to curb a pure emotional appeal. So really, leadership is escalating the problem, not helping to solve the problem.
The ones, there were 3 or 4 aldermen there from former state reps. They were orchestrating the students that were in opposition. The cadets sat there. They've been there for 3 or 4 meetings.
So really fanning the flames of emotional response to
But nobody
issues
asked.
that we're trying to decide upon.
Nobody asked how the cadets felt.
Mm.
Just how the other. And fear is a real problem. I mean, I'd like to help them,
Mhm.
but there are ways that you can solve this problem without shunning. This
Right.
is separate, but equal. Like, remember the blacks had to be separate schools, but not, but equal. And then special needs was separate, but equal.
And that's what they're trying to do to these cadets.
Exactly.
They're trying to force these cadets into a separate but equal
Accommodation.
accommodation some way.
Not the right approach.
No, it's not. It's not. And anyone who would contemplate moving here for the schools, or a family like ours, contemplating sending a child to
Get
school.
on the school board. That's what I recommend.
I don't think it's fixable.
I'm
I
hoping
really
that
don't.
it is.
I really just don't see it. When you see that the majority of the school board and the majority in the board of aldermen or City Hall is directing and really, at least quietly encouraging the emotional response, the lack of logic, the denial of truth. What do you do with that? It's a rhetorical question. I'm not expecting you to answer.
But you think an academic institution, the mission would be reason and logic,
right?
not fanning the flames.
Which goes back to your original quote, the quote about that was against socialism being an emotional, not a logical appeal. That came from a Harvard professor.
Mm-hmm.
So the educational system was at one point in our history, whether on the college level or the elementary school level, wherever, was advocating for a logical approach to examining and understanding our issues and problems that we face in our society. And that did come out of education at one point. And now, even though it came out of education, now that is being denied.
Yeah, it's the breakdown of our civilization if we allow it to continue. That's my concern.
Right. Well, it's certainly a breakdown. I think a lot of people at home don't know about it. If they're reading the paper, maybe they do. But
the Telegraph hasn't been very comprehensive, whether you
no, there's so.
But we ought to have a debate on the issue, that issue.
Right.
Not just this name calling and slandering and asking for, throwing tantrums. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Well, Doris, you've got your work cut out for you. I know there's a school board meeting tonight, and you have some folks coming to speak against your position, of course, but you have some folks who are coming out to speak in favor of rule of law and for pushing emotion aside. And let's take a look at some facts here.
I think you keep emotion in check. You know what you work with.
We are emotional people.
But you can use reason and logic to help you.
Right.
To feel more comfortable, to find a resolution that satisfies the needs of everybody.
Well, I wish you the best tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for standing in the gap. I think it's very difficult, and I think they're intentionally making it very difficult with police reports that really have no basis in logic. Just, again, an emotional response, trying to pressure someone of lesser character or lesser determination might have said, you know what, I'm done with these people.
Yep.
And left the board. But you're standing in the gap for students and families here in Nashua, and I thank you for that. It's very important.
It is.
So thank you very, very much for coming in.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you folks at home, too, for tuning in. You've been watching the show Perspectives. I'm your host, David Schoneman, here with Doris Hohensee, member of the school board, who is suffering from some emotional attacks on board from her colleagues on the board. And it's not fair. I hope that if you take a chance to look into these issues, you'll call your school board representative or your alderman and speak up on behalf of logic, truth, and rule of law. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.